Hey there, quick note before we get started. If you like content like this and would like to see us produce more, then please click on that subscribe link as we're trying to increase our subscriptions. Thank you. Hello everyone and welcome back to Level Up Meeples. Today I am going to record a video on Imperial Struggle, which is the spiritual successor to Twilight Struggle. Now, the only thing really that is familiar or same with Twilight Struggle are the designers. Aside from that, maybe there's some similarity in a couple of the systems, but this game plays incredibly differently and really doesn't compare too closely, I believe, to Twilight Struggle. So the goal of this video is to really help you in getting your first game started. I personally found the rule book to be pretty poorly written, honestly. The layout is pretty standard for war games or GMT games, but there are definitely some confusing elements in terms of where they're discussed, and unfortunately, there are some issues. There's 3 pages of errata, both having to do with board markings, card markings, and rulebook errors. So I'm going to walk you through a lot of that in a pretty quick video. My goal is to do a quick summary of the setup and then a fairly deep review of how to play the game. I'm not going to cover every single rule, but at least enough to get you started, and ideally enough to save you a lot of time. So with that, we'll walk through the setup and get going. All right, so for setup, I went ahead and did a lot of this, but you will find the complete list of setup steps in the Playbook, which is the second instruction booklet that comes with the game. The first one, the rule book setup, actually is not included in that version. So first, obviously, lay out the board and then prepare the event deck by separating out the succession events. So the event deck is the purple-backed one, and basically all you're doing is looking for the cards that say succession, and you're pulling out all of the other eras, and then you're going to go ahead and shuffle that deck and put it on the draw pile there. The third step is to mix up investment tiles. So the investment tiles are all of these. They should be face down and basically in the box that says investment tile stack. Simple enough. Next, each player takes their basic war tiles and mixes them up and places them face down on the player mat. And then you also take the bonus war tiles for the War of Spanish Succession, because that's the very first war. So if we look at this turn track on the board, you'll see here that we start with an era of peace. These are the eras. 1 and 2 is an era, 3 and 4 is an era, 5 and 6 is an era. And then in between each are some wars. So the first war is the War of Spanish Succession, and we right now are in this peace era. So for the war tiles, each player has a player mat, and you're going to take the tiles that have the blank back, and these are the basic war tiles. So you're just going to randomly stack them on this area. And then for the bonus war tiles, you're going to find all of the ones that say WSS, which is War of Spanish Succession, and then you're going to randomize them and stack them in this area of the player mat. So that is step 4. Step 5, you're going to place flags and squadrons on the map as directed below. And really by below, it means over to this side here. But what's nice about this map is that the starting spots are also color-coded. So basically what this step is referring to is you're just going to take your flags, blue for France and red for Britain, and put them in the starting spots on the map. you're not going to touch the yellow ones. So all of the ones that are colored, shaded blue or red should have a flag on them. Additionally, in this section, it lays out a couple other details that aren't covered over here. So you should look at this no matter what. It's not just for initial flag placement, it's also player marker placement. And there's one thing in particular that's only covered in this area, which is right here. France gets a starting bonus war tile for the War of Spanish Succession. And this is just one of those details of many in this game where you would have no idea about this. This is literally the only place this is referenced if you didn't pay close attention. And that's really why I'm shooting this video, to kind of point out some of those to help you along. So we'll do this right now. Basically what this means is France is going to randomly take a bonus war tile and they're going to put it here. And we'll get to this in a minute, but part of setup, you should do that just so that you don't forget that that's the case. Other things over here are, so we did all the flags. Next, the Navy box. Britain gets 2 squadrons and France gets 1. So we've already done that, but basically there are these squadron tokens, and in the Navy box on the board, you should put out 2 British and 1 France. Next, the general records track. Again, this would not be anywhere else on the board or in the book, but it is right here. So both players start with a debt limit of 6, actual debt of 0, and treaty points of 0. So over here on the general records track, you have a lot of things. Now, we're assuming you already know how to play the game a bit, but basically the victory points marker starts at 15. And similar to Twilight Struggle, it's a tug of war. So as France gains victory points, this marker goes up. But as Britain gains victory points, the marker goes back down. Okay? So basically, France automatically wins if this marker ever gets to 30, and Britain automatically wins if this marker ever gets to 0. So this starts at 15. Your debt limit, and we're going to talk about debt in a minute, but your debt limit for both start at 6. The current debt obviously starts at 0, and your treaty points both start at 0. So all 4 of these markers go near the 0. Then we get into advantage tiles. Now, I'll talk briefly about advantage tiles right now and then a little bit more later on. But basically, Britain starts with wheat and France starts with Algonquin raids. And this is, I'm just going to point out one other example, and then, as we go, we'll point out some more. But over here in step 11, it says put the advantage tiles face up on their spaces on the map, except wheat, which starts at the advantage space of the box for Britain, but it doesn't even mention Algonquin. So that's another typo and error in the rules, where it should mention both wheat and Algonquin raids. So the way that advantage tiles work are the following. The advantage tiles are these markers here, and there are a bunch of them on the map. There's a ton of them. You can see that there's 1 here, 2 here, 1 here. If we zoom out, you start to see them all over. And if a country controls any territories or markets or anything that is connected to an advantage tile, okay, by only lines that that country controls, then they get that tile. And that's why France starts with Algonquin raids, because France starting controls Algonquin, and since this is only line drawn back to Algonquin, they get to start with this. Similar with the British and wheat. Wheat is here. It's connected only by a single line back to here, Chesapeake, and the British start with that position, so they get the wheat tile. And we're going to talk a little bit more about advantage tiles later, but basically that's the reason why wheat goes here and Algonquin Raids goes here. Okay, so that is everything for this column. We'll jump back to this column here. And basically, this step, place the War of Spanish Succession war display next to the main board, and then each player draws 4 basic war tiles and randomly places them in each theater in order face down. So, the first war, as we talked about, is the War of Spanish Succession. Right now, in the setup, we're going to fill these war tiles. So each player is going to randomly draw, and they can't look yet. They're going to randomly draw 4, and they're going to put them into their colored boxes on this war mat. So blue is set, and now red is set. Okay? So that's the setup part for this war mat. Now, each player is now allowed, after they're locked in, each player is allowed to look at each of the tiles. Obviously, they can't share, they shouldn't share with each other, but we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. We already did this, so game turn marker is on 1, and the victory point marker is on 15. Okay, so now global demand. So the global demand tiles look like this. They just live up here next to this global demand track. There's 8 of them, and the step of the rule that we're on right now says to randomize them and then randomly flip up, there's 6 of them. Randomly flip up 3. So we'll go ahead and do that. And these are the items that are in demand for this peace turn. Okay? Mix up the 8 award tiles and place 2 in each region's award box face down. So the award tiles, I've already done this, but they're marked award marker. There's 8 of them. You randomize them and basically take 2 and put them in this award box for the Caribbean. 2 more in the award box up here for North America. 2 more in the award box here for Europe. And 2 more in the award box here for India. And while we're talking about it, that's probably another good thing to talk through is just the map itself. You know, this map is beautiful, and there's a lot of really intelligent things done here with this map that we'll talk about and will get easier to understand as you play. But there are definitely some issues and some labeling that could have been done better on this map. So a couple examples. First off, the theaters themselves. So each of these circles are called theaters. And they're not labeled at all. Like this is the North American theater. You will not find that anywhere on here. This is the Indian theater, India. Nowhere is it labeled as such. So that's a little bit frustrating. And what's even more frustrating is that this region of India has a specific name and sometimes is referenced on cards. But again, nowhere on here is the name of that region talked about. It's only labeled in section 3 of the rules. So, they could have easily just put a little label here or a little label along this bottom border, but they didn't. So anyhow, that's familiarizing yourself with the map. Next, it's talking about just getting some other markers that you're going to need readily available. The advantage tiles. So we've already done this, and basically, once again, this is just talking about putting these out everywhere. And when you're setting this up, the back side of this says the name, textiles. So you'll just find the area on the map that matches and drop it on. And then you'll pull wheat, again, to this advantage tile board, and Algonquin raids to this one. And then finally, place the initiative marker on the initiative space with the French side up. And the initiative space is right here, and France starts with initiative, so their side is up. So that concludes the setup. Now we're going to get into the sequence of play, and with that, we'll cover some of the rules. So we'll be right back. All right, so there is a player aid that comes with the game called Sequence of Play, and this should be used as you're playing to help you understand what to do and kind of direct you as you go along. So we will just basically go down this, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about 9, because that's the bulk of the game right there. But to start, let's just start at the top. So first, the deck phase. So this says to do something at turns 3 and 5 only. So we're going to skip it, obviously. But what it's referring to is earlier when we were setting up this event deck, we used only the succession era cards because that's the era that we're in. However, when we get to 3 and 5, you're going to add the Revolution and the Empire events to that deck. So that's what 1 is. We're going to skip that altogether. Your debt limit increase. Again, turns 3 and 5 only. So we'll skip it right now. But what it's referring to is these markers here. So as I mentioned, debt limit starts at 6. However, at the beginning of each era, you get a bonus, and that debt limit is going to increase by 4. So that's something that you do at turn 3 and 5. Okay, so award phase. For the first turn of each era, which is turns 1, 3, and 5, you're going to turn up the top award marker for each award box. And that's these here. So we'll flip the top one over for each of these. And what this is this is the amount of points, or the award rather, that the player is going to get who is winning each of these theaters at the end of the turn. Okay? So, North American award, whoever is winning this theater, and we'll talk about what winning means in a second, gets 1 victory point. Easy enough. Caribbean, whoever is winning this gets 2 victory points. However, that red 2 means they can't just be winning it, they have to be winning it by a margin of 2. Same thing here. India is going to be very valuable this turn. You're going to get 3 victory points, but you have to be winning it by a margin of 2. So that's all set. Global demand. So we already did this. But basically, you're going to shuffle together all 6 global demand markers and then randomly select 3 and turn them face up. So once again, the global demand for this turn is cotton, spice, and tobacco. And we might as well talk a little bit about the markets right now. So these are labeled. Basically, there's 2 in every theater except for Europe. So India has cotton and spice. And you can see that the cotton markets all have the cotton symbol. The spice markets all have the spice symbol. Caribbean has sugar and tobacco. And North America has fur and fish. So the only global markets that we care about right now are cotton, spice, and tobacco. Okay? The reset phase is next. We're not going to do that right now because there are no exhausted markers on the game, but next turn we will. So next we're going to deal cards. So reveal 9 new investment tiles from the investment tile stack and place them in the available investment tiles, and then deal 3 events to each player, and then discard down to 3. So first off, we're going to randomly pick 9 of these and put them in the 9 spaces below this track. And then we're going to randomly draw 3 cards here, give them to British, and 3 more cards for France. Now, it does say to draw down to 3, but obviously in the first turn, you only have 3. Later turns, you may have more, so you don't have to worry about discarding right now. Ministry phase. So the first turn of each era, each player selects 2 ministry cards and places them face down on their player mat. So this is the first area that we're going to get a little bit more detailed here. So each side has their own ministry deck. Here's the ministry deck for Britain, and here's the ministry deck for France. Inside of this deck are a bunch of cards that are labeled by the era. So S is Succession Era, E is Empire, R is Revolution. Obviously, since we're in the Succession Era, we're only going to be looking at the cards with the S's right now. So you don't even have to worry about what cards don't have S's on them. So I'll go ahead and isolate them for British. All right. So that narrows it down to 5 cards. Now, what this step of the rules is saying is to select 2 of these and put them face down in these 2 ministry card spots on your player mat. Now, how do you know what to select, especially if it's your first game? Well, good question. We're going to get into this a little bit more, but each of these cards has a keyword. Well, not all of them. One of them says none, I think. But anyhow, each of these cards has a keyword on them. What that keyword does is it grants bonuses at different times. The first time it grants a bonus is potentially when you play an event card. So the event card that we just dealt out have a bonus keyword on them. And you can get the bonus of the event card if you have a ministry card with that bonus word. So that's one way to easily narrow down which of these you might want to keep. Another way is during the wars, sometimes you get bonus strength for different keywords. So here you see the word style, which means if you were to have this card in play during the resolution of this war, you get an additional war point. So I think to make things easy, right now we'll just keep, so we have a style and a governance event card. So we'll just go ahead and keep the style and governance ministry card, okay? So once, obviously there's another element to figuring out which cards you want to keep, which is obviously what they do. So if you want to, you can also read their benefit and what they're giving you, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So for now, I'm just going to flip these over face down, like that, and they're hidden from your opponent for now. And we'll do the same thing for France. All right. So we're all set with the ministry phase. Initiative phase. So you skip it on turn 1 because France, as part of setup, starts with initiative. However, moving forward, initiative goes to the player who's losing on victory points. And initiative in this game doesn't mean you go first. It means you choose who goes first. So we'll get into that right now with the action phase. And that's where the bulk of this game is taking place. So, the action phase. During the action phase, each player is going to alternate selecting one of these investment tiles. Then they're going to play it, and then the other player is going to go. So let's talk about these tiles real quick. Let's pick this one. Well, let's pick this one first. So to start out, these tiles, these simple ones have two halves. The first is your major action, which is the top, and the bottom is your minor action, which is the bottom, obviously. There are a lot of rules pertaining to some of the nuances between these that I would recommend you become familiar with in the rulebook. But in short, your major actions have more abilities and you can use them in different ways than your minor actions. So if we go back to the map, there are a few different types of spaces. The first are markets. All markets are round, and they have a attribute on them for the type of market they are. So we've already talked about this is tobacco, this is sugar, but they're all circles. All markets are circles. Now what's nice about these tiles, which again you wouldn't find in the rule book, but the black shape on each of these tiles coincides with the shape on the map that you can use the tile for. So this here is a round market tile, or market chip, and you can use those points, those 4 points, for any market spaces. This here is a diamond for a political space, and if we look, there are a bunch of diamonds on the map, so you could use these 2 points to influence diamonds. The other type of space is military, which is right here, the hexagon, and those could be used for these navy spaces or these forts. And you use the squadrons, which happen to also be hexagons, during military. So that's at least an orientation about the different sections of the map. And hopefully some of these shapes are starting to now make sense with knowing that. So for this tile, you can use either order. So you can use the top first or the bottom first, does not matter. And basically what it means is you get 4 points to spend doing market-related items. So what that means is in the rule book, and I recommend at least becoming very familiar with the section 5 of the rule book, but basically it tells you how you can spend your points. So for the circle points, economic actions, you are able to shift markets. And we'll talk about what shifting means in a minute. But there are some nuances to how you can use those points that I recommend you read. Political spaces, which is the diamonds, okay, those are diplomatic actions. You can do the following. You can shift a political space, for example, and then you can actually also draw an event card, which is in the rule book somewhere, but it's not in this section, which is a little bit annoying, but it is on your player mat. So again, this is a player aid, which you wouldn't know unless you were familiar with the game, but basically it also shows you how you can use each points. So here you can see that the diamonds, you can draw an event card for 3, or you can shift a political space. For markets, you can shift a market space, and then for military actions, you can do any of these 6 items, and those are also detailed under military actions in the book, but we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so back to this investment tile. Let's just talk about the major event. Basically, I have 4 market points to shift markets. So what that means is, as the France player, I can shift any round space. And what a shift means is it's changing its state 1. So basically, this is a good example here, right here. I'm France. I have this sugar market, and next to me is this other sugar market currently controlled by the British. So to shift this once would be to take out the British flag. That's a shift. I'm also connected to this sugar market. To shift that once would be to add my own flag. So basically, a shift is changing the state, and you could do it a total of 2 times. If it's already flagged, you could shift it once to remove the flag, and then shift it again to add your flag back. But there are some rules to that, some adjacency rules that you should become familiar with in the rule book. But essentially, there are rules such as, in order to shift a market with your market points, you have to be touching that market at the beginning of your action round. So, for example, I could not shift Puerto Rico right now because I don't have any connections to Puerto Rico at the beginning of my turn. Now, I do have 4 action points to use, so I could shift Antigua, as we talked about, but I still could not shift Puerto Rico because it wasn't connected at the beginning of my turn. So that's one rule for shifting that you should become familiar with. There are some other detailed rules about isolated markets, for example, that I recommend you become familiar with, as well as protected markets, which we'll get into a little bit when we talk about military, but that's another detail there. So let's say I spent 2 of the 4 points by shifting Antigua, which again wouldn't be the smartest move, because if you remember, sugar isn't in global demand right now. So ideally, if I were playing from a strategic standpoint, I would be working and focusing on markets that were in demand. So maybe, let's look at India here. Cotton is in demand. So why don't we just, for this example, go ahead and shift West Bengal with 2 of my points. Now you'll notice that I didn't use all of them. I still have 2 left. That's okay for the major actions, the top action. You can still use the remainder of them. So I have 2 more. I have a lot of options. I can either spend them in India and just use them in the same exact way. So I could potentially shift here because it is connected. So that would be totally fine. Or I can go above the 2, and that's where debt comes in. So if you remember, you start the game with 6 available debt. I can keep going on this major action. I can go over that 4 by 6 throughout the entire era. So let's say I really wanted to shift. Well, there isn't a good example because I'm not. Oh yes, this is a great one right here. So this is a 3, and I am connected to it. At the beginning of my turn, I was. So I could use the 2 remaining action points to go here, plus 1 debt to make up for the difference. Okay? So debt is a cool thing because it allows you, I could go again. Like if I wanted to shift another market here, again, we run into, so I could shift here and take 2 more debt. No problem at all. Now you want to be careful with debt because there are some event cards which penalize you if you have more debt than your opponent, but those are pretty rare and not anything to stress too much about. So that's one option. Another option, let's just back out a couple of those. So let's just say I've only spent 2, is that I can go to a market in a completely different theater to spend the other 2. However, if you do that, if you use your points in multiple regions, theaters, then you have to pay an additional 1 point for each time you do that. So if I use 2 of my points to place it in this market, and then I also really want to get into the tobacco market and place it here, then I would have to take 1 debt because the 2 would be the other 2 on this tile, but I'd have a 1 debt increase because I need another action point to play in a different region than India. So that's major points. Now, minor are at the bottom. They're always 2. So every single minor is always 2. And there's a couple specific rules about how you can use minor points. Again, I would look at the rule book, but specifically, 2 very important ones are they can't be split up across multiple actions. So in this example with the markets, I shifted 2 different markets. You can't do that with minor. You have to apply them to a single space on the map. And then the second important rule to note here is that you can't shift any flags with minor points. You can only ever shift flags with major points. So for this diamond, which is political spaces, let's just say that I want this space here. I can go ahead and do that because I have 2 points to spend, and it's a diamond. There are not adjacency rules when it comes to political spaces. So you can put your marker on any diamond on the map, and basically with my 2 points, I'll just do this. And as we talked about earlier, whenever you control the spaces that are connected to advantage tiles through the lines, you get that advantage tile. And we'll talk a little bit more about these in a second. But because I have this political alliance now with the pirates, I basically get their advantage. So I can add that to my advantage tile section. And why don't we look at another example of those advantage tiles. So here's one in Europe. And you can see that it's connected by 2 lines. So I would need to control this and this to get this space. So some of these are connected by a single line. Some of them are connected by 2 lines. And I don't think there are any advantage tiles that are connected by 3 lines. So in order to grab an advantage tile, which is a big part of this game because they do give you pretty nice advantages, you'll need to grab the territories or spaces that connect to them. So for my minor action, 2 spent, I went ahead and took this for 2, and I got this advantage. Now, minor actions you can use debt for. So if I wanted, instead of this Buccaneer space, if I wanted to take this Spanish political space for 3, then that's fine. I can do that with 1 minor action, but I take another debt to do so. But we'll go ahead and take this Buccaneer space. All right, so that's this tile explained. Once you're done with a tile, it goes to the used investment tile space, and then it would be the other player's turn. So now let's go ahead and say it's the British player's turn, and we'll grab this tile. So this tile is adding 1 element, which is this cross here. Now the cross is significant because that's how you play your event cards. You can see here that they have crosses on them, and you can only ever play these cards if you draw an investment tile that has a cross on it, which adds some strategy to the tile that you draw because they don't obviously all have crosses. So as part of turn order, you also want to take that into consideration. Now, when you draw a cross card, you have to start with the event. You have to play your event card and resolve it immediately before you do any of the other actions on this tile. So let's go ahead and play this. And now let's look at my event cards. So we have 3 here. Now, this one is just a plain event card. This one has this symbol in the top left corner, which means to play it, it has to match an investment tile where the major action is also military. Okay? This one doesn't have that, so you can play it at any time. This one happens to have the economic symbol on it. So I could not play this card right now because this investment tile that I chose does not have the economic as its major. So my two options now are these two. The other thing you might want to look at is the bonus. So each of these cards grants a bonus ability, but to do it, you have to have a keyword match, governance and style. And this is where the ministry cards come in. So if you remember, we selected 2 ministry cards at the very beginning. Secretly, I might check them. So this one does have governance. Very nice. This one has style. So that's great. I could reveal either of these and then get the bonus of these events. So let's just go ahead and say that I'm going to play this event card, and I am going to reveal the ministry card with style. So now I flip this up. My opponent knows that I have the Jonathan Swift ministry card, and they see that there's a style match. So these ministry cards, they grant special abilities as well, which you get. Some are, per turn, some are one-time use, some are for the entire game. So you'll want to take a look at that. You basically use these exhausted markers. If it were, for example, once per turn, you could place this on the card after you've used it. But once this is flipped up, it's in play and you get to use it. Back to the event card. These event cards, a lot of them have 2 halves, and that's something to pay attention to. So since British played this card, we're only worried about this top half. The French benefit is on the bottom, which we're not going to worry about right now. So on the French half, it says to shift a political space in the German states, and if both are now British flagged, score 2 victory points. So the British states are, the German states. So the German states are here, and as you can see, this was a great time to play this because it allows me to shift a political space, which there are 2 of, but I'm going to go ahead and shift this one for free. And if both are now British flagged, which they are, score 2 victory points. So this goes down 2, and now British is winning by 2 points. So that was nice. And then also the bonus, which we're allowed to use because we have a keyword match, style, with this ministry card, style, allows me 1 additional diplomacy point. And whenever you see a symbol like this, it's treated as a major action. So basically pretend now that this tile has 2 actions on the top, 3 military points and 1 diplomacy action. And similarly, you're going to ask yourself, well, what am I supposed to do with just 1 point? You can use debt to augment that. So let's just say I'm going to increase my debt by 1, and now I have 2 diplomacy points, and with those 2 diplomacy points, I'll go ahead and take it doesn't matter, but I'll take this here. So I'll put a flag there, and now I've used this entire event card up, and it gets discarded. So once you use an event card, it gets discarded from the entire game and goes here. Now, we have the tile that we're working with. So we've used the event portion of this tile. We have 3 military points and 3 market points, economic points, to be used in any order that we want. So, for example, let's just go ahead and, as British, say that we want to get into this. No, we don't care about sugar. We want to get into the tobacco market. So I'll go ahead and use 2 of the market points to put a flag here, which is allowed because it's connected to an existing flag territory that I control. So that was my economic points. And now for my military points. with 3 military points, you can do a bunch of things, and those are all listed here. We're not going to talk about every single one of these. Again, this is a point where you should become familiar with the different military actions, but a couple that I will talk about. The first is, for 2 military points, you can buy a bonus war tile. So what are these war tiles all about? Again, there are 4 different wars that are going to be fought throughout the course of the game. When you fight a war, you're going to flip over, each of you are going to flip over these tiles, and they give you different strengths in each of these wars. So this one war has 4 different battles in it that are going to be fought individually. And these tiles give you bonuses for those wars. So in this case, there would be a 0. Well, I get to flip this as well. So we'll talk about the symbols also mean something. But for now, let's just worry about the numbers. So France has 1 to the British 2. Well, if I wanted to, for 2 military points right now, I could buy an additional bonus war tile randomly and add it here. So let's say, I was a little bit nervous by the fact that France already has 2 tiles here. I could add a second tile as well with 2 military points. So that's one thing you could do there. Another thing you can do is, for 4 points, you can construct a squadron. The British start with 2 squadrons already constructed. They live in the Navy box, and the French has 1 squadron already constructed. However, on your player mat, you have a bunch more that you can build and put out, deploy to this Navy box. To do that, it takes 4 military points. So again, similar situation. This is only a 3, but I could take 1 debt to build a squadron and add it to the military box. Okay? The other thing you can do is you can deploy a squadron for 1, 2, or 3. Now, you should look up why it would cost 2 or 3, but we'll just worry about the 1 for right now. For 1 military point, I can take a squadron from the Navy box and put it on any military spot in the game. Okay? You don't have to worry about connection or anything like that. They just pop up. So basically, I could, for 1 point, do this, and for 1 point, I could also, so this is a good example. This is 3. So for 1 point, I can take the first squadron and put it here, and then for 2 points, I can take a second squadron and put it in a different region. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll put it here. So this costs 1 point to deploy, but because it's in a different region, it costs 2 points. Now, one thing I might as well point out here is that this is an error with the map. These 2 Navy spaces are shaded green, which is supposed to mean they're not available until the Empire era, which matches here. However, that's a misprint. They should not be shaded green. That's included in the errata that I recommend you obviously get and understand what is wrong with the rules or the map, but these should be available immediately. So let's just say that I'm going to go ahead and go there. One other thing that you can do that we'll talk about, we're not going to talk about these 2. We might talk about conflict markers in a minute, but you can construct a fort. So the forts are also hexagons, and mostly there's actually no forts in the Caribbean, but here's an example of one. So this is a fort space. Again, this tile had 3, so I could go ahead and build a fort with my military points. Okay, so that concludes the British turn. They used this entire tile, it will go ahead and go here. And now it's back to French's turn, and we'll talk about the last icon on these tiles, which will be this one. So again, we're not going to go into detail anymore of these and play out the entire turn, but this does have an event symbol. So if they wanted to play an event, they would have to do that first and foremost. Then they can do any of these other symbols. So you're already familiar with the major action and the minor action here, but the new symbol is this, which is a war tile replacement symbol. So what that means is my war tiles are already deployed at random from setup. Let's say I had a weak one, which I do. Oh, I'm sorry, this is French, for example. So here's a great example. This is -1. It also deflags a territory of Britain, so it's not terribly weak. Let's just see if there's a 0. Yeah, I mean, this one's kind of weak here. So this contributes 0, but it also increases the my opponent's debt by 1, which isn't terrible because this is an example where not having any available debt can hurt you. So when we're resolving these tiles, if I were to flip this, then the British debt would have to go up 1. So if they weren't ready for that, if they were already at their debt limit, when I flipped this, since they can't incur any more debt, I actually would get a victory point instead. So, this isn't terrible, but let's just hypothetically say that instead of the debt increase, I cared more about the strength it contributed. So I was going to pick this tile. So whenever you see this symbol, you get to pick one tile, and you have to pick it first. So I'm going to pick this one. Then you get to randomly pick a new one, look at it, and make the decision as to whether you're going to replace this existing one with this new one or not. So in this case, they're pretty much the same. They both contribute 0, but this one is nice because it also gets rid of a fort or a squadron. So I might go ahead and swap this out, for example, and then this used one can either be removed from the game or put back and randomly shuffled with your basic tiles to be potentially selected again later. So that's what that circle means and how you use it. So at this point, we've talked about all of the symbols that you would ever see on these investment tiles. And the majority of the game is the players switching turns, picking an investment tile, using those points, etc. The other things that you can do are, for example, these advantage tiles. So, as you remember, you get these advantage tiles by taking territories that are linked to them, and you add them to your player mat. When they've first been added, you can't use them right away. You have to wait an entire turn before you can use them. But once you have them, then you're free to use them. And they do a whole bunch of things. I mean, this one you can see that it reduces the amount of coins to unflag a space in India. This one you can see that you can place a conflict marker on a fur market. You get to use them once per turn, so they do get exhausted, and there are exhausted markers that you would place on these once you use them. And then after your turn is up, you can unexhaust everything. And the other thing to be aware of, which actually I've not been able to find anywhere in the book, in the rule book, but the black writing here is significant. So, I already called it out, and it seems obvious once you call it out, but it's not really obvious if you're not aware that this conflict marker has to be placed in a fur market. So that means you could only place the conflict marker when you use that advantage tile on one of the fur markets. This one here, -1 coin to unflag, but it has to be spent in North America. So all of these advantage tiles do have regions that they are tied to. And this is one of those places that this tile right here is super confusing because it says the Carnatic Coast Market. Well, nowhere on this entire map is the Carnatic Coast labeled. You can only find it in one sentence of the rule book. And basically, the Carnatic Coast is this entire area south of this line, but in India. That's the Carnatic Coast. So that's another example where the rule book, or at least the map, could be labeled a little bit better. So that's how these advantage tiles work. You can use as many of them as you want for your turn, but obviously once you use them again, they get exhausted, and then you can't use them again for that entire turn. The last space to talk about that we haven't yet are these square spaces. So these are territories, and the reason why we haven't talked about them yet is because you can't do anything to them during the normal action rounds. So there are no square actions on any of these tiles. The only way you can influence these territory tiles are through the outcome of war, which we're going to talk about in a minute here. Okay, so back to the sequence of play. We just covered pretty in depth the action phase. Again, I would recommend becoming really familiar with all of the little finicky and nuanced rules in the book about that. But let's say, for example, that we're done with this phase. And by done, it means that each player has taken 4 investment tiles. So there's 9 total, which means 1 would be not selected at all. But each player alternates and takes 1 at a time until you've each played 4. Then we go to discard step 10, which is discard treaty points phase. So we didn't talk about treaty points, but they are marked here on the 0. And they're treated exactly like debt in that they add additional action points when you use them. The difference is that you earn them, they start at 0, and you earn them through different events or awards. So, there may be an event that says increase your treaty by 2. So now I have 2 points to spend, similarly to debt, but the other difference is that they must be spent each turn. Otherwise, when you get to step 10 here, you have to discard any that you have left over. So you definitely want to use treaty points when you earn them. So that's what 10 is about. 11 is resolve remaining powers, which basically means, some of these ministry cards, for example, might say at the end of your turn, and then in that case, that's when you would use that ability. Now we get into scoring. So, scoring works as follows. There's 3 things that you're going to score. The first is each theater is going to get scored. The second is this theater, Europe, has a separate award of 2 victory points for the person that has control over the most green bordered, they're called prestige spaces. So the most prestige spaces, and they also have a crown, gets an additional 2 points. And then the third scoring is whoever's winning on the global demand. So scoring is pretty simple. All you're going to do is you are going to add up the number of flags and compare. So in North America, for example, the British have 4 flags, and the French also have 4 flags. So let's just hypothetically say we ended like that. So the British have 4 flags, France has 5 flags, so that would mean that France gets 1 victory point because they ruled the most territories in North America. So you would just basically move this towards France and go to the next theater. So in Europe, you would again add up the territories, including naval spaces or forts. So in this territory, British has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and France only has 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here the British get 1 victory point plus a treaty point, and this is where you see that you might be able to earn a treaty point. So here, British gets a victory point and a treaty point. So they won that region, and basically you're going to do that for each region. Again, remember that this one means you have to win by a margin of 2. So whoever wins it has to have 2 more territories than the other player in order to get to those 2 victory points. Once you've done that, you look at the prestige bonus. So again, here, whoever has the most green diamonds or green spaces gets 2 victory points. So British has 1. This is 1 here. It has a crown and it has a green outline. And British also has, no, so that's it. But France also has 1. So since it's tied, and this is something that you might want to fight for during the action rounds, but since it's tied here, no one gets those 2 points. So once you've scored all of that, you look at the global demand, and that's handled exactly the same. So for markets, let's just look at cotton. British has 1 cotton space, but France has 2. So France is winning cotton, and basically we're in the succession error for cotton, so France gets 2 victory points plus a treaty point. So we'll just go ahead and do that, 2 and 1. And you're basically going to do that for each of these 3 global demands. And that's scoring. Now, one thing I didn't talk about is conflict, which there are a lot of rules about conflict. Again, I recommend that you become familiar with this. But essentially, a lot of events or a lot of these advantage tiles let you place a conflict marker in different places. And you can place it on any market or other tile, whether it's flagged or not flagged. You just put it right on top. And that impacts this space in a lot of different ways. And like I said, I would read the rules about how it impacts it. But basically, a couple big ways is that it lowers the number to shift it by 1. It also prevents the use of an advantage tile. So if I were to place this conflict marker here, then British couldn't use wheat. They still keep it, they still have it, but they can't use it until they pay to remove this conflict marker. And you can do that through military points. One of the actions is to remove a conflict marker for use of military points. And then the other big impact of conflict is it actually negates the use of it for scoring. So if there was a conflict marker here, for example, then during scoring, when we're scoring cotton, now it's actually 1-1. It's not 2-1. So instead of France winning this, it would be a tie and no one would get the award. Okay, so that is the scoring phase. And now the victory check phase. And so there's a few different ways you can win this game. The first is if you get your victory point to either edge. The other is, another is if you win all 4 theaters, so you win the award for all 4 theaters and you win the award for all 3 global demands. So if one player is able to win all 7 of those awards, then the game ends immediately and that player won. Obviously that did not happen in this case, so we would move on. And the next thing we're going to do is actually do the War of Spanish Succession, because that ended the first game turn. So now we're on this war and we have to resolve this war here. All right, so what does it mean to resolve a war? Well, the first thing you do is you flip over all of the tiles on this. So obviously, as we discussed, they could have changed throughout the different action phases, but the way that they're at right now is what you would flip over. All right. And then you resolve them in order. So this battle would be first, this battle would be second, third, fourth. And what does it mean to resolve it? Well, first and foremost, you would do any symbols on these tiles. And these symbols are covered in the rule book, but basically this means I have the option to remove a squadron or a fort. Actually, I'm not familiar with this symbol, but it may not be anything. Anyhow, once you've resolved the symbols, you then take a look at what they're adding to that war. So this is adding 4 points. These two tokens are adding 4 points for the British, and this is adding 1 point for the France. So right now the score of this war, without even looking at the map, is 4-1. Now we take into account the current board state. So this war is being fought in Europe. So we're only caring about Europe right now. And specifically, the things in Europe that we care about are right here. And that's control of Austria. So you basically would find Austria on this map here. And there's 2 tiles here, so we each get 1 point for those 2 tiles in Austria. So then it's 5-2. Next is Bavaria, which the French have. So that adds 1 here. So it's 5-3. Next is Denmark, Norway, which is no one owns. Next is Dutch Republic, no one owns. Next is German states, getting 2 more points here. So 7-2. Next is Savoy, no one owns. And that's the conclusion of this war. The British won it 7-2. So that means they won it by a margin of victory of 5. And here's what the British get. They get 3 victory points and 2 conquest points. And then the French, they get 3 treaty points. So French would get 3 treaty points. And British gets 3 victory points. And also 2 conquest points. So what does that mean? This is another area where I would recommend you just be looking at the rules. But basically, conquest points is how you shift the territories, the square spaces. So the available territories for me to use those conquest points are listed here. And basically, the winners, Britain, are able to spend these points by doing a variety of things on the map or in these territories. Territories are the squares. So you can also use conquest points on markets or forts, etc. But you mainly can use them on territories, which is the only way to impact territories. And the cool thing about conquest points are it's not actually a shift, it's a complete reversal. So if I were to use my conquest point here, I would just do that. So that's pretty nice. Then you move on to the next war, and you do it exactly the same. So you would resolve this war, this war, this war, and once you've completed it, there is another victory check. If one person, one side, is able to win all the wars, all the battles on a war mat by the highest margin of victory, then the game ends right then and there, and that player wins. Other than that, you would get rid of this war entirely, and you'd bring out the next war, which in this case is Austrian succession. So you'd bring out that war mat. You would populate it with the basic war tiles, and then turn 2 would start. So that war doesn't happen until after turn 3, but you at least can be working on your war tiles, working to control some of the strength areas during turns 2 and the first turn of Era 3. And that concludes an entire both turn and war for this example. So you would basically move this on to 2, and you'd start this sequence of play once again from the top. So hopefully that was helpful. I do recommend definitely getting this Errata, which is located on GMT's website. Also, there are some pretty good user-made player aids available on BGG that I would recommend getting. And ideally, hopefully this video gave you a good primer into the setup and how the game plays, enough for you to jump right in. And really, from this video, I think you could start playing. Obviously, you're going to have to refer to the rules at different sections, but at least you can do that as you go. Now, obviously, I called out some of the issues with this game, particularly the errors on the map, in the rules, the way the rule book is written. But I will say that this game is a lot of fun. It's fantastic. Once you get to understand how the different spaces intertwine with each other, it is really a good example of a tug of war between you and your opponent, and it's a lot of fun. I personally like it a lot better than Twilight Struggle, particularly because, in Twilight Struggle, you had to be very familiar with the deck of cards, and you had to know what cards are available to your opponent. So you had to really learn a lot of content in that game. This game is not like that at all. It's less about the cards and the long-term focus on them, and more about the tactical focus of how you're controlling each of these theaters, the long-term strategy of when they're going to matter in the wars, which I personally like a lot better. So hopefully this video helped you. If it did, please subscribe, and we will catch you next time.